welcome, and thanks for joining us for the launch of the Ignition Project's first business-facing report, Nature-Based Solutions to the Climate Emergency, the Benefits to Business and Society. So we're launching this new report at a time that appears to be a real sort of turning point, and that the appreciation of nature and green space seems to really be coming in at an all-time high. And there's a lot of talk about what a green recovery from COVID will look like. So this report we're launching is really going to highlight the supporting evidence for nature-based solutions as both a means for now and in the future to generate economic and societal environmental benefits. So we're going to get into that in a bit more detail later. So this is going to be a real action-packed hour-long webinar, so we're going to get straight into it. So firstly, this is an overview of what we're going to go through today. So following my welcome is Sam Evans at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who's going to be giving us an introduction to the Ignition project. Then Sam Hartley at Business in the Community will provide an overview of the research that fed into this project we're launching through the creation of an evidence database. And I'll give an insight into the new report and we'll do a quick interactive quiz to see how closely you've all been listening. And then lastly, we'll do a panel session with representatives from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Bruntwood, Sel Environmental and the University of Salford. So all of these are Ignition Project partners, or they're working on the project in some capacity. So this panel discussion will be facilitated by my colleague, Alistair Mann. So as I said before, first up is Sam Evans at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and he'll be giving you an introduction to the Ignition project. So Sam, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great, thank you, Rob, and great to be here today and at the launch of this really fantastic business report on the evidence base we've produced for the case for green infrastructure investment. So yeah, my name is Sam Evans. I work as Head of Natural Environment at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, leading the Ignition project, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview on how this report and the evidence base fits into our wider plans within Greater Manchester for increasing our green infrastructure and in particular the Ignition project itself. In Greater Manchester, we've been doing a significant amount of work over the recent years on understanding the value and the benefits of our natural environment, and which this evidence base and the business report really gives us some insights into. And we were the urban pioneer under the government's 25-year environment plan a couple of years ago, and as part of that, we did some work on understanding the big high-level benefits that we get from our natural environment within Greater Manchester. So we know that we get £1 billion worth of benefits each year from our natural capital, from our natural environment, and that total assets are worth £28 billion. So we really know the value of our natural environment within Greater Manchester and the benefits that brings to our economy and people living there. We've also set out an ambitious 5-year environment plan within Greater Manchester, and natural environment and natural capital and green infrastructure are key elements of that, and we know that we need to increase our green infrastructure to help us combat the climate emergency, as well as take action to reduce our emissions now and achieve carbon neutrality. So the next slide just shows what that plan covers, and that the natural environment is a key part of that plan. We also know, and this evidence base really shows us the benefits that the natural environment can deliver across some of our other ambitions as well. So it can mitigate climate change by locking up carbon. It can green infrastructure can improve our air quality. It can lead to us consuming less resources, less water, for example, and it can make us more resilient and better adapted to climate change. We also know it can bring benefits to our people, our places, and our economy by tackling and improving our natural environment. So on the next slide, these are our priorities for the natural environment and how we're going to go about improving our natural environment within Greater Manchester. And increasing investment in our natural environment is a key barrier and a key action that we are working to progress, and that's really where the Ignition project comes in, and where this evidence base really contributes to making the case for investment in our natural environment. The next slide just shows some of the other work we've done on investment. We produced a natural capital investment plan, which really gives us a set of priorities to build on those natural capital accounts and that value that we get from our natural environment, and really tells us where we need to prioritise actions to increase that investment in our natural environment, where the opportunities are going to be, and how we can encourage investment by showing where benefits for the natural environment are and where those can be turned into, where those can generate revenues and where those revenues can potentially generate returns to investors. And the evidence base that we're launching today is really a key step in that, showing us what benefits there are and how we could potentially use those benefits to generate revenues and provide in turn returns to investors who may want to invest in our natural environment. The next slide just shows us sort of the investment in the natural environment, and we're kind of on the left of this diagram at the moment, where most investment in the natural environment comes from grant funding, public funding, or very forward-thinking businesses who will put green infrastructure on their buildings or on their sites. We want to get to a point, as we've seen with renewable energy over the last 20 years, where we have mainstream investments in our natural environment, moving over towards the right-hand side of this diagram. And we're hoping that this evidence base gives us a real step in that direction, showing the benefits that that green infrastructure can bring, helping us to increase confidence and move over towards the right-hand side of this diagram. So final two slides really just tell you a little bit about how the Ignition projects fits into that, and it's really a key pillar within our plan to increase investment in our natural environment. We work as the combined authority with 11 other partners, including UKGBC, who have produced this report, Business in the Community, the Environment Agency, and other partners on this project. And this is really all about developing the investment case for urban green infrastructure in Greater Manchester to help us to adapt our city region to the effects of climate change that we know are locked in and that we're going to see, particularly surface water flooding and the effects of urban heating. So my final slide just shows you the chunks of this project and the work that we, along with the 11 other partners in the project, are doing. So the aim of the project really is to develop an investment case for green infrastructure at scale within Greater Manchester. And to do that, there's 6 building blocks of the project. We want to develop a pipeline of projects where nature-based solutions could be installed and contributing to increasing and uplifting green space within Greater Manchester. To do that, we need to bring business models and funding mechanisms to be able to do that, and that's really where this evidence base fits in telling us what benefits green infrastructure brings, which we then need to translate into, okay, how could we encourage investment to fund those particular outcomes. The evidence base also helps us build investor confidence to do that, so moving across that diagram that I showed you away from just public sector grant funding, which has come under increasing pressure over the last 10 years or so, to get other sources of investment, as we've seen in the renewable energy sector. We're also doing a significant amount of stakeholder engagement to create an enabling environment with government, with local authorities, with our water company in the northwest, but also with people and businesses, which is again where this report really comes into play. At the University of Salford, we're also creating a living lab where people will be able to visit and see green infrastructure in action and understand the benefits that brings. And finally, we'll also need to develop some sort of vehicle to help us deliver these projects at scale. We really want to see large-scale deployment of green infrastructure within Greater Manchester, because that's the scale of action that we know we need to adapt our city region to climate change within the future. I will stop there. That's very much a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing in Greater Manchester and the Ignition project, and some ideas on where this business report fits into our ambitions. Thank you.
Sam, thank you very much. A lot to really think about there. Interesting to hear about the sort of billions of pounds worth of investment from the natural environment, and definitely need to check out the natural capital investment plan. Also excited to see when we start delivering these large scale investments for green infrastructure. So up next, though, we have Sam Hartley from Business in the Community. She's been involved in both the creation of the report, Nature-Based Solutions to the Climate Emergency, as well as the supporting research that fed into this. So Sam, I'm going to hand over to you to take us through that research and the evidence base that was created through this.
Hi, thanks Rob. Yeah, no problem. So yes, as Rob said, I was part of the research for the evidence base that started last year alongside GMCA, and also part of translating that evidence for the report we're launching today. So as Sam has said, the goals of the Ignition project are to increase investment in nature-based solutions to help us to adapt to our changing climate. And a lot of the work we do around that is kind of researching funding models and funding streams. So we really needed to do our research and to get a foundation of quantifiable benefits to then build on top of these investment opportunities, but also to really understand how do these nature-based solutions perform, where are their strengths and weaknesses, and where is the most evidence that can then be built up into these funding models. So over a 6-month period, business in the community and Greater Manchester combined authorities undertook a mammoth task of collating the huge amount of evidence that's out there on nature-based solutions, from toolkits, reports, academic studies, and Rachel Morrison, the Nature-Based Solutions Advisor for Greater Manchester Combined Authorities, is on the panel today. So after the presentation, she can direct any questions on this to her, and obviously the rest of the panel as well. So as I say, there's a huge amount of information out there, and it was really about putting it under a lens that was useful for our project and our goals around creating that enabling environment for investment, and kind of putting a different lens on it, making it really accessible. So over the 6-month period, we collated over 1,000 evidence items. They were across 5 urban nature-based solutions. Urban because of the focus for our project in Greater Manchester, and we identified them as areas where we could have the most influence on the most greening in this environment that we're working on. And we matched them to 12 different benefits. So we looked for evidence on these 12 different benefits. So this is the detail we went into here. So on the left-hand side, you've got the nature-based solutions we gathered evidence for that are featured in the report we're launching today as well. So we've got green walls, green roofs, urban green spaces, street trees, and sustainable drainage systems. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the benefits we were looking for evidence on. And these really range from your standard environmental kind of water quantity and quality over to kind of more economic, so land and property value, local economic growth, and then social as well. So you've got the health and well-being side and the amenity as well. So we really wanted to get the really larger picture on how these nature-based solutions can perform and who benefits and how really. Okay, so following this initial research period, obviously all this work is feeding into the project, but we decided that it would be really great to make all this evidence available for kind of other projects or organisations who would find this useful. So we do now have the following resources available to download on Ignition GM. So we have all of the databases available, and that's all of the raw data that we've collated. And it was reviewed in June as well, so it's very up to date. And as the project continues, we hope this will remain a live repository of information where we can add new research that we find through the course of the project and through kind of other contacts we make, and when we're sent different new projects as well. So they will grow and they will change. So those are all available to download just now. And on the right hand side here, you've got this kind of supporting resources that we've created to kind of facilitate the use and make everybody get the most out of this data. So we've got a 3-page overarching summary, which is the user guide. We have a headline findings report, which I'll talk about shortly. We have a methodology report, which is great for anyone who's interested in the more academic side of how the review was done on the evidence, kind of what criteria we were using to collect it, and a lot of detail about the process we underwent to bring it all together. So that's useful for anyone looking at that angle. We also ran a how to use the nature-based solutions evidence-based webinar, which is now available to watch as well. I'm sure we can circulate that afterwards. And that really gets down into kind of the nitty-gritty of the databases and the data, how to go into them and move around them, and kind of get what you want from them. So those are all available now. Just to speak a little bit more on the databases, so on the left-hand side there, as you can see, it's not pretty, it's not a fancy online toolkit. It is a mammoth database containing a huge amount of information. And that's really what we wanted. We wanted it to be accessible. We wanted people to adapt it to their needs and filter it through different information. So obviously we've got a lot of columns there. You can filter it by the year, the evidence was collected. You can filter it by the location. So you can really kind of make it your own. And the bottom right there is an extract from a summary table. In each database, we have a summary table where we pulled through the information where possible on specific units of measurement. So for instance, water quantity, there's kind of a few key areas where all studies measured. So peak flow reduction, peak flow delay, and runoff reduction. And we were able to put the ranges in here and create our averages, and that's what we've included in the report. So these summary tables are a really great kind of oversight of all the information we've collected. For benefits such as health and well-being, or perhaps amenity, there's obviously a huge range of units of measurement in there. So for health and well-being, you've got kind of the mental health angle, the physical exercise, the physical health. There's obviously a lot of different units of measurement, so it's difficult to summarize in this small table, but we do have a lot of data on that. So it is worth going into the databases if you are interested on that side of things. And we have tried to pull out the key findings in the report we're launching today as well. Just to give you a little insight, so this is a snapshot of the Green Roof database. And so in there, we've got 256 evidence items from 156 sources. The table below that just details the kind of different classifications of green roofs that we've separated the data into, so extensive and intensive. And this is dependent on the depths of the green roof there. So obviously that will have an influence on its ability to manage water. So that is relevant for the different data you're looking at. And we have tried to detail this in the report we're launching today. And the bottom chart there just shows the split of the evidence we found for green roofs. And this is kind of interesting in itself if you wanted to get a quick overview of where the most evidence is for each nature-based solution. So as you can see here, for green roofs, energy use, temperature and water quantity have a lot of evidence against them. Now, we didn't look at every single piece of evidence on green roofs because we have obviously had our specific classifications for this review, and we only had a 6-month period. So, but it does kind of give the insight, a kind of overarching insight, and it's quite surprising for some of the nature-based solutions as well. And it was surprising for me looking through the research and seeing where these strengths are, and perhaps areas you wouldn't really expect as well. Okay, so just to speak a little on the headline findings report, and that's available as well. So in this report, there's the classification, the evidence profile, the summary tables, but also a written summary of the evidence against each benefit. Rachel and myself wrote this report following the initial research period. And its benefit really is this kind of detail at the bottom there. You can see this little quote from it. It's kind of adding a bit of colour onto the process of collecting the data. So if you looked at the summary table, or if you looked in the databases, you wouldn't really get some of the insights that we had to give once after we'd looked at the data. So for instance here, a small number of studies were identified on the carbon sequestration and storage benefits of green walls in comparison to other nature-based solutions. Green walls have some capacity to sequester carbon. The amount could potentially be sequestered is thought to be less than green roofs. So you get that real interesting insight that you wouldn't look at, say for instance, if you just looked at the summary table. So as Sam mentioned, some of these different aspects we're linking in with. So we have an extensive citizen engagement programme that we're linking in with in the project run by RHS, Groundworks and City of Trees. We're linking in with the Living Lab, which you'll hear more about in the panel. We're producing a similar local authority report next year. We continue to update the data and support the funding model research as well. So this slide is, we're very aware that this data has a lot of different uses for a lot of different organisations. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what that could be, and this is relevant for the evidence base and the report that we're launching today as a kind of one large piece of work, is say for instance you are installing X amount of trees as part of a net zero strategy. You can then estimate the amount of water that they'll manage. Some of the data in there is based on per metre squared, so you can then calculate that up and estimate how much your intervention is going to affect these different benefit areas. The information can be used to support installation proposals, business cases and funding bids, and we really hope you get some inspiration on that today from Rob going through the report as well. You can calculate the impact on specific communities, so you can target areas of bad air pollution. You can calculate if you were to import a green hedge or a green wall for street trees, what percentage less air pollution would there be for the pedestrians in that area. In communications and engagement, the databases in the report we're launching today are a great resource for stats. for toolkits and guides and social content as well. But engagement, more importantly, because you can target the interests of the persons you're trying to engage. So for instance, if you're speaking to a community organisation, you can pull out the health and wellbeing stats, you can pull out the amenity stats and the crime rate stats. So you can really tailor your content using the database and just pull from it what you need. Okay, so that's everything from me. So hopefully that's given you an oversight of where we've got the information from and how you can access the actual raw data yourself, and a little inspiration as to how to use it and the report going forward. I'm going to let Rob talk about how we took all of this huge amount of information into the snazzy report that we're launching today.
Thanks, Sam. That's great. Clearly a huge amount of research both yourself and Rachel at GMCA undertook, going through over 1,000 evidence items from scientific journals. I'm not really sure how you both managed to stay sane during this, but I'm sure everyone's going to find that really useful. So now I'm going to give the last presentation, which is about the report we're launching today. So the report, I believe, is actually now live on our website and should be live on the BITC as well, or will be very shortly. And my colleague Tekla is going to post a link to both the report and the evidence base, which Sam Hartley just described, at the end of this webinar. So you can click through to there, or you can just visit our web pages to find on there too. So please do look out for these. So to start with, it's worth saying that this report was a real collaborative process between the Ignition project teams at Business in the Community, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and the UKGBC. And the report itself, what it looks to do is really translate and highlight the key findings of the Ignition nature-based solutions evidence base, which Sam has just described to us. So the report outlines how nature-based solutions can benefit business and building performance, helping organisations to make smarter choices on installations by increasing the understanding of who's going to benefit and how. So we mapped these benefits of nature-based solutions across 5 key impact areas. So climate change mitigation and adaptation, resource use, nature and biodiversity, health and wellbeing, and socio-economic impact. So the report focuses on 5 nature-based solutions. So sustainable drainage systems, or SUDs, street trees and SUDs-enabled street trees, green roofs, green walls, and urban parks and green space. And the real purpose of this report is to start to inspire that confidence in business leaders as well as investors to increase their use of nature-based solutions to start delivering greater outcomes for business, society, and the environment. So I'm now going to give you a quick snapshot of what's actually in the report by taking you through some of the headline findings. So for sustainable drainage systems, which, if you didn't know, are the management of surface water runoff in the urban environment. So they mimic natural drainage whilst being able to support things like biodiversity. So some of the key findings are that these systems can retain 60 to 72% of rainwater runoff, which can obviously help mitigate the risk of flooding. They can also, they also have 60 to 80% similarity in species richness to that of a natural pond. So that can obviously contribute to biodiversity gains. So we also looked at street trees and SUDs-enabled street trees. So we found that these types of trees can on average increase restaurant patronage by 30 to 50%. So you can see that's going to have a large economic benefit. We also found that they can help mitigate the urban heat island by reducing air temperature by up to 3 degrees. Whereas green roofs, on the other hand, can produce 6.7% energy savings for the space directly below a green roof, which is going to save both money and carbon emissions. They were also found to increase the property's value by up to 6.9% when made accessible. So I think that's quite an important point about accessibility, because it not only increases the property's value, but also enables the green roof to provide wider societal benefits. And green walls can similarly produce an energy saving, this case slightly more than a green roof with an average of 8%. And green walls also have a significant improvement on air quality and human health by reducing the atmospheric nitrogen dioxide. And they can do this by up to 18 to 35% when in a street canyon. So that's where you've got a road with buildings either side of the road. And then lastly, urban parks and green space, which are areas naturally or artificially covered with vegetation. So it's things like playing fields. we found that these were able to increase property value by 9.5% when they're in direct or close proximity to a park. And they too were found to retain 84.2% of rainwater runoff, so obviously quite a significant amount, and again helping alleviate flooding risks. So now we're going to try something a little bit different, and then we're going to do a short quiz with everyone on the webinar to see your knowledge on nature-based solutions and see if you were listening closely to that as I whittle through those stats. So this is going to be a pretty straightforward multiple choice quiz, and my colleague Tekla is going to start this now, and it should appear on your screen. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. You should have all the questions there, so you can quickly sort of look through and select your answers to those. So yeah, so it looks like for the first question, you guys are right. So yeah, so it's for the amount of rainwater runoff from that SUDs retain. So yeah, 60 to 72% is the correct answer there. And question 2, again, clearly you were listening, but it was a close one with 10 to 30%, whereas the correct answer was 30 to 50% is the amount that street trees increase restaurant patronage by. Question 3 looks like that's also the correct answer. So yeah, obviously some close ones again. But yeah, so it's 6.7% that a green roof can increase energy savings by. And then lastly, so we've got question 4. So the percentage of nitrogen dioxide that's removed by a green wall in a street canyon, so it's 18 to 35% again. So it looks like it was pretty close between those 3 top percentages. And then lastly, again, you got the right answer, which is good, that the percentage that a property values increase from urban parks within close proximity. So well done. Then we're now going to go on to a panel discussion, which is going to be chaired by my colleague, Alistair Mant. He's the UKGBC's Head of Business Transformation. So I'm going to now take us out of the presentation mode, and Alistair, I'm going to hand over to you to take over for the panel.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everybody. Thanks for all the presentations so far. I think they've been excellent. There's been some nice feedback already in the chat bar saying how clear they were. And also how useful people think the report will be, which is fantastic. Just to keep asking people to please do put your questions using the Q&A tab and put them in there rather than the chat, so that I can hopefully just facilitate one stream of questions rather than trying to jump between the two. That'd be fantastic. And then if I can ask all the panelists to turn on their cameras. And we're going to start by each of them in turn giving a short little intro to themselves, including what their role is on the Ignition project, on this report specifically, if they had one, and importantly, how they hope industry use this report, because this is very much a report that we hope business, property construction and occupiers of buildings, so that's most businesses indeed, pick up and really find useful. So Sam is not going to get a chance to do this because we've already heard from him, but we will come back to him because there's a couple of questions that have already come in regards to his role. So I'm going to start with Dr. Rachel Morrison. Would you like to do your intro, please?
Sure, thanks, Alistair. So yeah, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the Nature-Based Solutions Advisor at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. As part of the Ignition project, I work on sort of research and development of business models for nature-based solutions and all the sort of ideas around sort of innovative finance for green space. As part of this project, I was involved in the design and development of the nature-based solutions evidence base, working very closely with Sam Hartley on this. Particularly, I was sort of helping with the methodology behind the collation and the development of the databases and the data in them. And in turn, I helped advise them on the data included in the report. In terms of sort of how I hope that the industry uses this report, I think that really, I suppose in developing this, we hope that it will be helpful for those people wanting to sort of understand the potential performance of nature-based solutions, and that it's really used to help develop more sort of persuasive cases for funding and making decisions on whether to fund nature-based solutions. Thanks, Alistair.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rachel. Next up, I'm going to hand over to Craig at Bruntwood.
Hi, I'm Craig Morley, one of the energy managers for Bruntwood Estates. We are a regional property company based in the north of England. We've got over 100 commercial buildings and a multi-million pound pipeline of redevelopment and refurbishment. We're an unfunded partner on Ignition, but we are a commercial landlord with a lot of properties in Manchester. We buy for the long term, so we buy older buildings and develop the buildings. There's issues with older buildings with regards to space, etc. So this project is hopefully going to allow us not to only see the environmental benefits of nature-based solutions, but also how they can be commercialized and how we can actually, as Rachel said, put a business case together to actually do this on the buildings that we've got. Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks, Craig. Next, Norhan Hasham, over to you.
Hi. So I'm Norhan. I'm a researcher at the University of Salford. I'm part of the team working on Ignition, led by Professor Hisham Al-Qadi. And what we're working on is the Living Lab work package. So we're creating, designing and constructing the Living Lab, and that would be on the university campus. We're really excited at the University of Salford about this business report, actually, because it would be the base for our work. So what we're doing at the Research Living Lab is actually trying to experiment with green infrastructure, trying to push forward towards innovation in green infrastructure. And this report would basically be the baseline that we compare to. We need to understand that this experiment or these results and data relate to actual figures from the ground and actual figures from existing research. In terms of what the industry, how we think the industry would work on related to this report is basically, well, from a research point of view, we're not just hoping that the industry would use this report as a guide, but rather to use this as an experiment on its own, to feed back their results and tell us about their experiences with pushing forward. Because that would be an addition as well. That would be in addition to enriching the data pool generally for GI. So that is our hope, to add, as Craig mentioned, results not only from the Living Lab, but from industry partners, from investors to push forward.
Brilliant, thank you. And then over to Jack from ESL.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, my name's Jack Shuttleworth. I'm a project manager from Sel Environmental. So we are currently the principal contractor at Salford University for the Living Lab. We're currently actually on site. We've come to the end of our first week with phase 1, which is the installation of a rain garden. We've got about 6 weeks left on that installation, and we are due to commence phase 2, which is a much larger proportion of the project. We're due to commence that on the 21st of September, which will take us through into the new year. Phase 2, we will be installing a living wall, green roof, tree pits, and a sort of like a technology exhibition area. So I wasn't involved in actually creating the report itself, but it's something that I think would be very useful for us as a contractor. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jack. So we've had quite a few questions coming in. I'm feverishly trying to read them and think who they're best for. To start with, there was one that I can answer, which was around, is Ignition the first of its kind? And are we working with other local authorities? And I think it's fair to say, as someone has noted in a response, that actually there's quite a number of EU projects focusing on similar issues around nature-based solutions. And indeed, before COVID struck, we were setting up an event to bring all those projects together to ensure that we were learning from each other and also bring members of industry to hear from all of them. We're currently resetting that. I think it's to be in the new year, around February time. And there was also a question around whether we have been working with other local authorities. And indeed, we're just about to start turning this evidence base into something which local authorities can use as well. And as part of that, we will of course be bringing many of them to the table to figure out what's most useful for them. So I think I'll just come back to Sam Evans on that. Is there anything else you'd like to add as to how we're working with other local authorities, but also what is it that stands this nature-based solutions project out from the others?
Yes, so I think, yeah, as you say, Alistair, there are other EU-funded projects and other projects going on, each with a slightly different focus, and we will be the only project trying to tackle how we encourage investment in urban green infrastructure. So I think we are unique in that regard. As for other local authorities, obviously our focus has mainly so far been particularly on Manchester and Salford within Greater Manchester, and we work closely with them and sort of taking that out to the other 8 local authorities. I think it's something we could do more of, and I know through the webinar you mentioned, we're hoping to bring together more projects in other local authorities. We're hoping through things like the evidence base and the forthcoming report that we can put this message and get what we've done and publicise that across other local authorities and have that open across the country and beyond. You know, to share the work that we've done and led on here in Greater Manchester.
Brilliant, thanks Sam. And I'm going to turn to Rachel next. There was a question about how have you utilised the data to inform decision making on which solutions should be or are a priority?
Sure, thanks Alistair. So the data contained in the evidence base has sort of really shown that each of the different MBS types that we looked at has a real range of benefits, but some of them, and maybe this is the product of some of the research that's been done in academia, really come out a lot stronger in terms of their benefits than others. And again, sometimes this is gaps of research, but the way we've used this is to really sort of help us to analyse and prioritise how we can develop these business cases for each of these nature-based solutions. So, for example, for green roofs, we looked across the MBS evidence base and for green roofs, and we were able to really see that the energy savings, the sort of temperature impact, the roof longevity, and also sort of the rainwater retention were really sort of key benefits, and we were able to prioritise them. And then the next step we've taken through prioritising them is to develop sort of a cost-benefit analysis tool which really focuses on particularly on those benefits and working them up into sort of more of a monetisable business case.
Thanks. I'm going to turn to Craig in a minute around that monetised business case, because there's a few questions in around, you know, have any of those benefits been monetised? How are we going to take these findings to developers and owners of buildings? And what are people doing now about it? So Craig, you probably haven't had that long to assess the report. In fact, the much weightier background evidence base. But on your sort of first review, how do you think this helps the business go further in terms of putting nature-based solutions on and around your properties?
It gives us a guide. It gives us an idea of what the costs are going to be. The biggest problem we have is the OPEX cost, and it's the ongoing cost. It's how we're going to keep the nature-based solution looking fresh, looking commercial, and how are we going to, you know, what do we need to do? What's the cost going to be? Using this report, seeing some of the figures, it has been a bit of an eye-opener to really the cost for some areas are a lot more than we would expect, but some are a lot lower. And the value that these solutions can add to a building, that obviously from a commercial landlord can be reflected in the rent that you can charge for a building. So this is going to be very interesting to review this in line with some of the developments we've got now to see, A, are these costs in line with the costs that consultants put forward for the solutions? If not, well, we need to go back and start asking the questions, where did you get your information from? I think that just having the information, with this being more the norm, if you like, it will mean that developers like us and others will start looking at it more. If more people do it, if it becomes more visual, if it's more transparent over costs, and the ongoing costs are people are transparent about those costs, it gives businesses more confidence to actually implement nature-based solutions. I also think there's a big push needed from local authorities to reverse the trend of paving, slabbing areas in city centres, and to start putting back green into the cities, which will encourage landlords and building owners to do the same on their space.
So there's lots for both to do in terms of business, for the enabling as well, and action from local authorities. And I'm going to bring Norhan in there because there's a question, or maybe a point made around having long-term studies would be really useful, and also how are we bringing the end users into this conversation. And so I think the Living Lab's really obviously a good example of how we're trying to do both of those, and also, to Craig's point, is make it real for developers and owners, because we actually have something to show them. This is what we mean when we're talking about nature-based solutions. So how's the work going on that?
Well, the Living Lab is a little bit a mix of different things. So we're trying to put different installations in on different levels on the cost scale, for example, on different levels of the innovation scale. So as to monitor separately the different installations, and say, for example, that this benefit is higher in this specific installation type of green roof, of green wall, and so on. But the other thing that we're trying to do as well is to experiment with the whole system. So going back to the discussion about how different the project is, this is a little bit as well of how different it is, because we're not just monitoring a green wall, we're monitoring the whole system. If we have an integrated system of different installations, would that benefit more? Would that be more business oriented? So would businesses be more interested in having a connected green roof and a green wall together, or it's more beneficial for them to have them separately? In terms of water runoff, in terms of reutilizing and recycling water, and so on and so forth. Heat as well. So we're trying to look into integrating that. And part of this integration is not only the physical installations, but rather the people who are dealing with those installations. So in terms of, for university, we obviously have the staff, the students to take into consideration, but we also have an open campus. So we do have an element of people coming into the campus from the surrounding community, from people living around Salford and the city centre of Manchester as well. So part of what we're trying to do is bring in the people, know how they would feel about it. So for example, one thing that we're doing is a survey. So we're trying to measure people's reactions before having the installation of the Living Lab elements and after, and seeing whether their perception of the spaces increased, seeing whether they use the spaces around these installations more, and so on. Another thing that we're trying to do as well is bring in the people through events. So part of what we're doing is working with other partners, specifically on comms, making sure that we have during and after the installation of the Living Lab. So Jack is actually saying about the rain garden is taking place right now. So by October, we should have the rain garden ready. So that could be the start of events to bring in people from the community, from the stakeholder spectrum, from investors, and showing them that this is what's going on. And that includes people around as well. So we do have facilities on campus that people use, and we see families going through the campus all the time. So that would be interesting to see the effect of having the green infrastructure on the different spectrum of the stakeholders.
Great, thank you. So maybe anyone who's in or visiting Manchester, go and do a walkthrough. Go and check out what's there, and it's developing obviously over the coming months as well. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot more data coming up for Rachel and others to sift through and feed back into the evidence-based report, which is great. I want to bring in Jack there. You obviously worked on a number of green infrastructure projects, nature-based solutions. We've had a question around is it easier to implement any particular type of NBS to refurbish buildings? I presume that's sort of meaning, you know, it's all very well to put it on the very small percentage of new buildings, but obviously there's a huge amount of existing stock there. Is there any particular type that's easiest?
Yeah, so it's a good point. I would say each sort of intervention has its own set of obstacles to overcome. I wouldn't say any is particularly easier than the other. It's just a case of making sure that you utilise the correct sort of system, the correct products in the right application. So, for example, tree pits in the city, you have issues with services and things like that. Whereas if you utilise a tree pit system that is more shallow, so it requires less of an excavation, you can overcome the problem associated with services. With living walls, a lot of the problems with retrofitting to old buildings is that the existing wall is not strong enough to support the actual weight of the living wall. So you can utilise systems where you have like a steel frame fabricated that sits off the wall and transfers all the load vertically to the ground, and then it's just tied to the wall so it doesn't obviously fall over. So that's one way of overcoming that. And then in terms of a green roof, blue roof, you've usually got a loading constraint, which again can be overcome in many different ways by maybe using planters, more sort of advanced planters on areas of roof that show to be stronger, and then sort of more basic planting of areas of roof where it's weaker. So I wouldn't say there's one element that's easy or preferable. It's just got to be looked at individually and the correct system utilised. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to come back to Sam here because there's a few that I think are most relevant to you, also perhaps to Rachel, about how is this going to be put into local planning policy, and that point again of, you know, new build, but also what about the existing? And then a second one on that for either of you around, are you able just to give a few bits of information on the community engagement piece? Because I know, you know, a lot of the partners on the project are involved in that.
Yeah, so I'll take that planning piece first, and then perhaps hand on to the other Sam to talk about sort of the engagement and work we've been doing on that. So, yeah, I think as this report points out, 85% of the buildings that will be here in 2050 have already been built. So our focus on Ignition really is on what we can do with our existing stock of buildings, our existing public spaces, our existing spaces, around private spaces around buildings and on sort of highways and roads, because that is where we really need to take action. So in GM though, we haven't lost sight of, you know, that 15% of buildings that will be built between now and 2050, and we are developing and have consulted on twice now a spatial strategy for Greater Manchester that complements the local plans of the 10 local planning authorities. That is scheduled to be adopted next year and has within it requirements relating to biodiversity net gain, which will be made mandatory by the government's environment bill when that's enacted over the next 6 months or so probably, and also relating to sort of green factors on new buildings. So we're kind of taking a two-pronged approach really, where we're focusing on the levers we have through planning policy to tackle new buildings and new development that we've got ambitions for in Greater Manchester, and making the case for investment in retrofit. And it's a similar issue to what we're facing on carbon mitigation and the challenge of retrofit for carbon reduction, and how we're taking that a different approach for new buildings. But I think this, you know, this evidence base makes the case for that, you know, putting it into new buildings as well as on retrofit. But obviously we do have the extra levers of planning and spatial strategy policy to be able to do that. So hopefully that covers what we're doing on that, and happy to share details of our spatial strategy around afterwards. Sam, would you like to pick up on the stakeholder engagement work that we're doing?
Yeah, no problem. So the Ignition project has got the Royal Horticultural Society, City of Trees and Groundworks, who are the main operators of our citizen engagement programme. It's been quite extensive already, so they obviously already had a lot of engaged networks that they already dealt with before the project, who they've engaged, and I think it's in the hundreds of workshops they've run between them now. A lot of that has been around kind of mapping perceptions on green space. Additionally, they've also ran a survey around green space and those perceptions as well. And there was a direct piece of work with the evidence base where we produced kind of a comms resource where it's kind of, you said this, well, actually the evidence says this. So it's kind of bridging that gap. And a lot of that, we found that a lot of the benefits that was spoken about from the citizen workshops was the kind of health and well-being angles, obviously that everybody is really aware of how they function, but less so on kind of water management benefits of nature-based solutions and temperature benefits. So we're really trying to bridge that gap with them. We do have an upcoming a few schools programs as well, where the community engagement team are working to engage with younger people. And so that's upcoming next year. I think I dropped my email in the answer to the question as well. If someone's specifically interested in that work, I'm not directly involved with it other than the evidence base, but I can link you in with the team and they can kind of give you an overview and you can see what would be interesting in that for you as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sam, for suddenly stepping in there as extra panelist. That's excellent. There's loads more that we could discuss, and I've seen that there's lots more questions as well, but I am about to hand back to Rob so that we can finish on time. I would just say to our panelists and all our speakers is do in the next few minutes have a run through of those questions, and if you're able to then answer some of them live in the Q&A chat. I think would be great for the attendees. And with that, thanks very much to everyone, and back to Rob.
Alistair, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for that great panel. Interesting to hear a bit about how the Ignition project is standing out from those other EU projects by really focusing on that investment in urban green infrastructure, and that really as well putting that focus on the existing stock of buildings. And interesting to hear from Craig as well about from the sort of asset owner perspective, needing to better understand that OPEX cost and how the sort of long-term impacts will be from that. And hopefully this report will support that in some form. So we're now approaching the end of the webinar. So I do want to leave you with an idea of what's coming up in the Ignition project, as well as at UKGBC and BITC, mostly in relation to nature-based solutions. So construction has started on the Living Lab, as Nohan and Jack mentioned earlier. So this is, I believe, expected to finish in winter, correct me if I'm wrong. And then by spring, I believe after the sort of, it's had a chance to actually grow, they're going to start to do some tours. And I think they're going to be called Seeing is Believing. So do look out for those. And as was also mentioned, the English project is going to be creating a very similar report to this, but for a local authority context. And obviously through that, we'll sort of engage with them to better understand, what is useful information for them. And then at UKGBC, so we're currently running a 2-year Increasing Nature-Based Solutions programme, which will enable more ambitious organisation targets and delivery of nature-based solutions. So please do check out that on our website for more, and Tekla's going to share the link for that in a moment. And at BITC, they're continuing to address the climate emergency through their Challenge 2030 and through the incorporation of nature-based solutions for mitigation and adaptation. So yeah, just to finish, my colleagues now going to share those links that I mentioned. There's a few there. The one for the report itself, one for the evidence base, for the UKGBC's programme on nature-based solutions, as well as the BITC Challenge 2030. So please do check these out. And of course, I hope you find the report useful. Please do share this with your colleagues or anyone in your network who you think would also be interested. So on that note, I think we'll end there. Thanks to all our speakers and panelists